Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to another A to Z film challenge. Friend of the channel and fellow YouTuber Roger Kirby made a comment on my non-English language film A to Z challenge. You should do one about obscure films. So here I am doing an A to Z film challenge, a film per letter, but of obscure films. Now, these are films that I have in my collection, so obviously they're not that obscure, because we could all make lists of films that aren't actually available in physical media. But this is a fun little exercise of less well-known films, perhaps, rather than obscure films, but obviously there'll be people that have seen all these films, so they're not actually that obscure. But by all means, give it a go and leave your alphabet of obscure films in the comments below. I'll leave a link to Roger Kirby's channel, and you can go subscribe, because he does excellent content. So for the letter A, I'm going with Attila Marcel. This is the first live action film by Sylvain Chomet, who's more famous for a couple of animated features. This is a lovely addition by the Blue Collection. I'll just show you the inside. The disc is a record, and as you can see, the booklet has a little stylus there, which is a nice little touch. This is a quirky film. Yes, the word quirky can sometimes be a sign of something horrible to come. This just about stays on the right side of quirky. It's about a mute boy whose parents died. He's raised by two aunts. And music is a big part of his life, a big part of his parents' life, and a neighbour who's quirky feeds him soup that brings his memories back. Again, this is very much production design and the feel of a cross between a Wes Anderson film and a Jean-Pierre Jeunet film. So if you like that kind of thing, it might be up your alley, and if you don't, it probably won't be. Next is the debut by Panos Cosmatos. I did a random review of this a long time ago, Beyond the Black Rainbow. He's obviously more famous for doing Mandy with Nicolas Cage, but for me this is the much better film. I thought Mandy was a good film, but not great. Whereas I think Beyond the Black Rainbow has more ideas. Again, set in 1983, it also has a thing for the 80s. But it's 1983 in a parallel universe almost. This is kind of science fiction horror about a facility. There's not a lot of dialogue, it's all in the visuals. But it is a wonderful... again, the colours, production design's fantastic, the score's wonderful. Again, not really bothered about plot particularly, it's more about the journey. This is a Region A Blu-ray. So for the letter C, again, a film I did a random review of. You just need to look up my random reviews and there'll be a few of these in it. It's Captured by John Krish. This is an excellent BFI release because it has a lot of his short films on it, which are fantastic, from the road safety information film Sewing Machine, which is absolutely terrifying and fantastic. Searching, again, it's a fire safety video. HMP, which is a wonderful 55-minute kind of recruitment video for the prison service. The Finishing Line, which is amazing, which is a public safety film based on a school sports day on the railways, the live railways. How we got away with it, I'm not quite sure. There's a 35-minute documentary about John Grish's career. The film itself captured is about British POWs in the Korean War, and again goes into brainwashing, and it's quite dark. So this whole set is really well worth having, along with the film captured itself. But the associated films and the release and the extras are absolutely wonderful. I think you can pick this up relatively cheaply, and it is quite wonderful. D, I mentioned Jean-Pierre Junot earlier. This is Dante 01, and this is directed by Mark Caro, who kind of co-directed Delicatessen and the City of the Lost Children before they kind of went their own ways. Again, this is Dominic Pignon, who's a regular with Jean-Pierre Junot. Stars in this. This is aboard a space prison. Again, you can make the argument, not surprisingly, this is more style over substance, but the style is very nice. Again, greens and yellows. You could argue Alien Resurrection probably pinched the production design, even though I can't actually remember when this was made, whether it was actually before or after. Not actually sure, but the production designs of Alien Resurrection and Dante 01 are fairly similar. Again, not really plot heavy, more character and journey heavy. That's Dante 01. Again, another random review I did a long time ago. Executive Koala. Obviously this has executive with koala head, which generally everybody else is perfectly normal. Obviously we see somebody on the disc with a bunny head, but that happens later in the film. The director did quite a few of these films, also Calamari Wrestler, but this one's almost like American Psycho but with a koala bear. Why not? Next, I thought it might as well be a Hal Hartley film in here, so I'm going to go with F for Faye Grimm. This is the middle film in the Henry Fool trilogy. Objectively, probably the two bookend films, Henry Fool and Ned Rifle, are better than Faye Grimm, but Faye Grimm does have a wonderful Parker Posey central performance, because this one's less about Henry Fool and more about Parker Posey's character, his wife. And it also features a wonderful performance by Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum and Hal Hartley were almost born to work together, and Ned Rifle is actually a pretty satisfying conclusion to the trilogy. So that's Faye Grimm for the letter F. For the letter G, well, you knew John Sayles would probably be in this at some point as well, so I'm going to go with Go for Sisters. This is John Sayles' last film, and this stars Edward James Olmos, who gives a fantastic performance, Lisa Gay Hamilton, who's fantastic as well, and Yolanda Ross. This is about two old friends who could go for sisters. They were friends like 20 years ago and their paths cross. One of them's a parole officer, the other one is just out of prison because she has a drug addiction problem, and her son has went missing on the US-Mexican border, and she kind of cajoles her old friend to team up with ex-cop Edward James Olmos and go to Tijuana, get into the underground, the underworld, and try and find her brother. Or son, even. Again, it's just a typical sales film. Again, it kind of features on the three characters rather than a whole bunch of characters. And you could argue it is probably his best film since Sunshine State. Great performances, well written, and again gets into the milieu, the corruption in Tijuana, and kind of about friendship. Can it actually last over that long period, and when people go different, or life takes them down different paths. Let's go for Sisters for G. For H, I'm going to go with The Horde, which is a French zombie film. This is very much like The Raid. Again, I can't actually remember whether it's before The Raid or after The Raid, but it's pretty much people trapped in a housing project, and it's full of zombies. Again, it's people who hate each other. It's two drug gangs, essentially, and there's personal animosity between the characters. And what I kind of like about The Horde is the fact that how many films do you see people who don't like each other, they're thrown into this traumatic, highly tense situation, they come out of it and they somehow see each other's perspective, and they somehow understand each other a little bit better because they've been through this traumatic event. And this is not that film. Nobody learns anything, nobody feels kind of closer to the people they don't like, and that's like so refreshing. And the ending is pretty much just a continuation of their beef from the start of the film, so I kind of like that, the fact that they don't somehow, because they've been through this horrible experience of fighting off zombies, that they learn something about each other. Not the case. I is for Intacto, which is a wonderful little Spanish film from the early 2000s about luck, and whether luck is actually a force that can be harnessed. It kind of broadens a kind of basic idea from 13, that film about Russian roulette competitions, and it kind of broadens out to the questions of luck. Max von Sydow makes a cameo appearance near the end of the film, which is quite wonderful, and in typical von Sydow fashion walks away with the film. But it's a really nice, understated Spanish film, but it does have lots of wonderful little ideas. Next is Alain René's Je t'aime, which probably isn't that much of an obscure film. I finally got around to watching it a few weeks ago. It's a time travel one. Obviously René's kind of, lots of his films have some element of time, or about time, the passing of time. This is about going back in time a year, but only for 5 minutes, and the time traveller gets stuck. I mean, the production design of the kind of pod that they put him in is very Cronenbergian, and it does kind of strike you a little bit from Crimes of the Future, the same kind of production design. Not the same, a similar kind of pod idea. It has a wonderful ending, and it's fantastic seeing this character kind of stuck in and between time. This is originally Kino Lorber. You can kind of see a bit of the production design of the device, if you like, and then there's the outside of it, if you can see. So it's very, it did give me kind of Cronenberg vibes. I mean, definitely one I'll have to watch over and over again until I'm stuck in a time loop, but certainly well worth a look if you're into the kind of mind space of Rennie films. So for K, again, another one that I did a random review of a while ago, Kokoro, which is roughly Heart, I think, by Gon Ichikawa. A kind of love triangle with a tragedy, not the kind of film in general I'm interested in, but again, just the cinematography, the shot compositions of it, and the kind of doomed, bleak, existential nature of the film really draws you in. It's perhaps a little long at 121 minutes, but a lovely little film. L, going with late phases. This is a very low budget werewolf film. Not a star cast apart from Tom Noonan, who has a nice little role. The creature design is a little bit like Dog Soldiers. They're kind of bipedal werewolves. And this nice twist is it's a kind of gated community. The central character is a middle-aged war veteran who's blind. So facing werewolves when you're blind perhaps isn't the best circumstances, but at least you can't see them with their big sharp pointy teeth. This is it's a Region B steelbook. You can also get it 101 Films have released it. It's just, again, a perfect example of a fun little film, not a lot of budget, but if you build it on character, because at the start he is a bit irascible and not that likeable, but you do grow to respect him, and the effects are really well done for, again, not a huge budget. That's Werewolves for the letter L. For the letter M, Mimbo no Ona by Itami. This is his last film, because after this film he was stabbed and ended up dying. He was stabbed by Yakuza, because this is a satire on the Yakuza going round and extorting hotels and such. And a woman comes in to deal with them. I think there's also a sequel, The Taxing Woman, perhaps, or an earlier film, The Taxing Woman. This is the second one. Lots of fun. I remember seeing this probably 30 years ago, never been able to track it down. Tracked it down on obviously DVD, but still not available on Blu-ray. I know the Criterion has released a couple of these films, so it would be rather nice to see this one released, because it is a lot of fun. This one isn't really obscure, but I do like to mention it as often as possible. This is No Orchids for Miss Blandish. This is on the Indicator, which is a multi-region, and it's also in Kino Lorber Region A, which I also have. This is, to quote, nasty, gross, brutish, a dish for twisted minds. This got into terrible trouble when it was released. This is 1948. This is a gangster film set in America, but most of the cast are English, based on a novel by an English writer who had never been to America, so was just imagining what gangsters were like. And the dialogue just has this weirdness to it, because again, it's creating a world of gangsters by people who had never had any experience of gangsters in that world. It's fairly brutal in places, but it's just this odd mix of tone, and the dialogue is off but also kind of works. It's just a wonderful little film, and again, one of my favourite indicator releases, and well worth checking out, even though it might not be everybody's cup of tea. So for letter O, The Outsider with George Sanders. This is a wonderful little potboiler melodrama about a pianist who gets in an accident, and the surgeon messes it up so she can't use her hands and will never play the piano again. Enter George Sanders, who has an amazing machine that could either fix her hands or cripple her forever. And it's just the back and forth between her family and George Sanders just being George Sanders, basically. This is a Network Region B Blu-ray, which you can pick up for next to nothing. I mean, obviously I'm biased because I'm a huge George Sanders fan, but it's a wonderful little afternoon melodrama with top quality George Sanders. P is for Penny Slinger, Out of the Shadows. This is one of the few Anti-Worlds films that I would actually recommend picking up. This is a multi-region A, B and C disc. This is about Penny Slinger, who was an artist in Britain in the 60s and 70s. She used collage and created fairly controversial imagery, and using the female form, i.e. her body, and empowering it. I'd quite like to actually pick up some of her books, but they're either impossible to get or really expensive. It's a wonderful documentary about her, because obviously she's still alive, and so she talks about her own work, which is always good. And an artist, you can actually hear an artist talk about her own work. And she was kind of transgressive, but also has been completely forgotten about, because I was to say I've never heard of her, but that doesn't really mean anything. It's stacked with extras, and it's a really good documentary that I've actually watched a couple of times. Obviously sometimes documentaries you don't actually revisit them very often, but her art is kind of so arresting and visually interesting that also, if you can't find the books, which chances are I'll never be able to get the books, this is the next best thing. So that's P for Penny Slinger. Q, again, I don't know how obscure it is, it's on Scream Factory. A Quiet Place in the Country by Elio Petri. One of the handful of Petri films that are on Blu-ray. Really need to get more Petri films on Blu-ray, because he is one of my favourite Italian directors. This stars Franco Nero and Vanessa Redgrave. It's not amongst my favourite Petri, but I will be obviously rewatching it. The Scream Factory has a commentary with Troy Howarth and an interview with Franco Nero. This is about an artist who's having issues, nightmares. His agent tells him to go find this place in the country which needs to be done up. So while he's renovating it and trying to paint, his visions and nightmares are still coming back to him with increased ferocity. It's perhaps not as interesting as I'm making it out, but again, I do need to watch it again. But anytime you can watch a Petri, you're going to have an interesting time. So that's A Quiet Place in the Country. Again, probably not that obscure considering it's in Shout Factory, Scream Factory. R, I'm going to go with R100, which was available on an expensive Blu-ray somewhere, but I think I can't find it anymore. The R100 is kind of a replacement for like R18. You can only watch this film if you're 18. So this suggests you can only watch this film if you're 100. This is fairly barking Japanese film about S&M. It's very hard to describe, about a man who gets further and further down the sadomasochistic route. But it's also funny, it is light-hearted, it's absurdist, but it's well worth a look. Hopefully I'll get a Blu-ray at some point. Looking at you, Third Window. S is another film I've talked about before. Surely Visions of Light, Visions of Reality. It's not a cinematography documentary. This is, I think, one of the earliest random reviews I ever did. This is a film where the director Gustav Deutsch takes 13 Edward Hopper paintings and recreates them in live action. And it is interesting if you're familiar with Edward Hopper paintings, as the scene kind of slowly moves into focus and then into position of the final painting. Again, this is a really niche film, highly recommended if you're a fan of Edward Hopper, and also if you're kind of interested in the process of making art, as far as that shifting of where is the perfect position to actually paint this painting. But in reality, it's a wonderful film, but again, fairly niche. For T, I'm going with a Korean film, the Taebaek Mountains. Obviously the cover gives away a lot. This is based on a famous novel, or a famous series of books from Korea. It had 10 volumes apparently, and it's basically about haves and have-nots in Korea over the generations. It's 168 minutes long. It is quite dry, but it's also kind of fascinating and fairly riveting. So, fairly obscure. Again, this is a Nova Media release, and it's all region, as quite a few Nova Media releases are, which is quite helpful. Yeah, quite dry, but well worth a look if you're kind of interested in more political films and kind of sprawling kind of epics over a period of years. So for you, I'm going to go pink with Underwater Love. This is in Third Window's Pink Films, Volume 5 and 6, which are kind of sex films from Japan, but because it's Japan, they're not really about the sex particularly. Some of them are just wonderfully shot with great composition, and in this case, Underwater Love is just a little bit demented. This is from 2011, and it's about a woman in her mid-30s who works in a fish factory, who one of the fish aren't dead, so she takes it and throws it into the river next to the factory, and a kappa or a sea or a water sprite picks up and eats it and says thanks very much. And it turns out this kappa was an old high school boyfriend of hers who drowned in a swamp, died, and became a kappa. She is engaged to be married. The kappa ends up being a co-worker. All he does is wear a mask and a hat and gloves so they don't see his little fishy hands. He has a sexual relationship with a co-worker, but he's really in love with her. There is full kappa sex scenes, if you're a kappa sex scene fan. There's also a MacGuffin about whether he can return to being a human, but she might have to sacrifice himself by using an anal peril. Oh, and did I mention there's also songs? It's actually a musical, so it's a Pink musical. Yeah, forgot to mention the songs, including a wonderful, rousing closing song. It's just a lot of fun, but again, you're probably going to have to be in the right mood. It's one of those films that you're either going to completely go with and have a good time with, or you're going to switch off after about 10 minutes. But is that not the way with every single film I recommend? For the letter V, again, films that I've mentioned before, I'm going to do it again. Violence Voyager by Uchiha. These are animated, but in that certain animated style that once you get used to it, it's quite beautiful and well crafted. There's the cover of Violence Voyager, and you can see there's some business going on here, this little strange looking character. This is quite dark. It's about some kids who on the way home go to this abandoned amusement park, but it's abandoned for a reason, and all manner of weird body horror and strange things are going on. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, you're going to have to watch it. To get, because you can't describe it. I suppose it's a lot, like quite a lot of Japanese films. On their way, they stumble upon a mysterious amusement park called Violence Voyager. It doesn't take long for things to get weird, as the boys discover a group of scared children who can't seem to escape and soon find themselves under attack by robot-like humanoids. I should have just read the back. Wonderful visual style. There's the two boys there. Granted, he kind of looks like a hobbit, but he's not. Lots of fun. But again, not for everybody. Next, I'm just going to go with another Korean film. This is Will You Be There? I think I did a random review in this as well. This is a romantic time travel film, which again, normally wouldn't be my thing. But again, because it's Korean, it's just done so well, acted so well, looks beautiful, and is quite wonderful altogether. This is a plain archive Blu-ray, which is region A locked, but well worth checking out if you can get your hands on it. For X, obviously there's not that many films with X. Again, this isn't very obscure because it's on a Mondo Steelbook, but it's We Are X, which is almost a real life Spinal Tap about the band X Japan, who are a huge metal band in Japan, been around for about 30 years, 40 years now probably. Never really broke in America, but this film made me go and buy a few albums, and they're not bad. But again, lots of Spinal Tap. Should I be laughing? Should I not be laughing? The kind of pomposity is there. The obligatory band tragedy is in here. But if you're interested in bands and music and the history of bands, the story of bands, this is pretty interesting and a lot of fun and pretty good music as well. But again, not for everybody, as I feel as though I've said for every single film. For Y, the young and prodigious T.S. Spivet. This is Jean-Pierre Junot's second last film. I did try and watch his Netflix film, but I had to switch it off after like 20 minutes. It was just too annoying. This one's English language, about a young boy who's constantly inventing things, and again it's quirky. Again, it has that kind of Wes Anderson-ness to it, but it is an enjoyable film. It's not amongst his best, but if you're that way inclined, it's well worth a look, and it's certainly a lot better. Well, also I haven't seen the Netflix one all the way through, but it's certainly better than the 20 minutes of the Netflix one I watched. And then Z, what are you going to do with Z? You're going to go with Takashi Miike, aren't you? Zebra Man 2, Attack on Zebra City. I haven't seen Zebra Man, but Takashi Miike makes Zebra Man 2 a lot of fun. I'll just read you the kind of review on the back by Japanator.com. Seriously, Batman's just a psycho who's into flying rodents. A zebra's like an effing horse with an awesome paint job. Zebras can kick hard. At best, bats might give you rabies. So that doesn't necessarily tell you whether the film's any good or not, but it's Takashi Miike, so watch it late at night and you might get some fun out of it. I certainly did, and there is actually rather a lot of extras in this one. I'm not aware there's a Zebra Man 3. Bizarrely, this is actually a 2-disc DVD and Blu-ray set. So there's Zebra Man. You'll obviously know that's Zebra Man. So that's Zebra Man 2, Attack on Zebra City. And that is my obscure films A to Z. Again, you can write comments and say none of these films are obscure, you've seen them all. But please give your alternate A to Z of obscure films. Again, the only caveat for me was I had to have them in my collection, because again, as I say, naming obscure films you've never seen and you can't get is one thing, but this is A to Z of obscure films that I actually own. So thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that, and if you didn't, I apologise, and hopefully you'll enjoy the next one. So this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.